It was one of those afternoons where the rain didn't fully commit, just a mist that left the pavement darker, smelling faintly of metal. I ducked into the cafe mostly out of habit, partly because my apartment felt too still. The same corner table, the same chipped ceramic mug the barista always seemed to give me. She was there again. Not that she always was, just enough times in the past month for me to notice patterns. Mid-40s, hair tied back like she'd done it without a mirror, reading glasses perched low on her nose. She didn't sit like someone killing time. She sat like someone who had already given time enough of herself. I told myself I didn't stare, but maybe I lingered a second longer than necessary when our eyes met. That day she caught me. "Do you always stare like that?" she asked, not looking up from her book right away. I felt my throat catch before I could think. "Only when it's worth staring." She did look up then, just briefly, enough to make me glance down at my mug, tracing the rim with my thumb like it was suddenly the most interesting thing in the room. Her smile wasn't wide, more like she was privately amused at something she wouldn't bother explaining. She turned a page, sipped from her thermos, and that was the end of it. For now. I tried to read, but the words kept sliding past me. I noticed small things instead. The way she rested her glasses on the table when she drank, the faint click of her ring against the thermos lid, the way her eyes flicked to the window whenever the light shifted outside. At some point, she stood, walked to the counter. I caught myself flicking my eyes toward her hands. Small paper receipt, fingers curled around a pen as she signed something. My coffee was cold by the time she came back. "You drink slow," she said as she passed my table. "Not in a hurry," I replied. She didn't answer, but there was a pause, like she might have. The rest of the afternoon blurred into the hum of the espresso machine, the muted chatter of people who'd never notice either of us. By the time I stepped outside, the mist had thickened. I walked the 3 blocks home with my hood up, wondering if I should have said more. My apartment greeted me the same way it always did, dim light through half-closed blinds, the faint smell of last night's coffee in the sink. I sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through my phone. No new messages. I typed one out to no one in particular, then deleted it before hitting send. The rain started tapping harder against the glass. I thought about her again, not in the way you think about someone you just met, but in the way you remember an unfinished sentence. Something in the pause she left behind stayed with me, like a door left slightly open. It was almost dark when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You left your scarf." I didn't remember leaving a scarf. I stared at the message for a long minute before replying. "I don't own a scarf." A beat passed. Then maybe you just left an excuse to come back. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or read into it. Either way, 20 minutes later, I was back at the cafe. She was sitting at the same table, the so-called scarf folded neatly beside her. It was plain gray, the kind you could find anywhere. "I think this is yours," she said, sliding it across the table. "It's not," I said. Her mouth tilted, half amusement, half something else. "Then humor me," I said. She poured tea from her thermos into the spare cup in front of her. "Too hot to drink yet," she said. We didn't rush conversation, just the sound of the rain outside, the faint hiss of steam from the espresso machine. "You live alone?" she asked eventually, like it was just small talk. I nodded. "You?" She didn't answer right away. "Not anymore. Divorce. 5 years ago." Her eyes flicked to the window, as if the view could buffer her words. "I kept the apartment. Less space to fill." I wanted to ask more, but something in her posture, straight-backed, hands loosely clasped, made me hold back. She changed the subject. "You're young. 24. Her eyebrow lifted slightly. "My son's age. If I had one." The words should have landed like a brick. Instead, they just sat there between us, adding a quiet weight to the air. We drank tea without speaking. The warmth settled into my hands, my chest. I caught myself watching the way her fingers curved around the cup, how she rested her chin briefly against her palm before catching me looking. "What?" she asked. "Nothing." The corner of her mouth moved again. "You stare a lot." I smiled faintly. "Worth staring." She didn't laugh this time, just looked at me a moment longer than was casual before glancing away. The rest of the afternoon passed in slow, comfortable silences. I helped her carry her tray back to the counter. She didn't need the help, but she let me. Outside, the rain had stopped. She walked with me to the corner. When the light changed, she touched my sleeve. Not to hold me back, just lightly, like testing if I was really there. "See you around," she said. I crossed the street, but halfway across, I turned back. She was still standing there, scarf in her hand, watching me like she wasn't sure if she should wave. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next time I saw her wasn't at the cafe. It was in the hallway of our building. She was locking her door, hair still damp from a shower, sleeves pushed up, a grocery bag balanced against her hip. "You're across the hall?" I asked, surprised. "You never noticed?" I hadn't. Or maybe I had, without letting myself connect the dots. She shifted the bag. "I'd invite you in, but—" Her voice faded, replaced by a small shake of her head. I offered to carry the groceries. She let me. Her apartment smelled faintly of lemon and something floral. Warm light from a single lamp. The place was tidy in a lived-in way. A stack of books on the coffee table, a sweater draped over a chair. "Tea?" she asked. I nodded. She moved around the kitchen with quiet efficiency. The way her hands worked, rinsing cups, measuring leaves, felt more intimate than it should have. I stood awkwardly near the counter, fingers brushing the edge. When she handed me the cup, our fingers touched. Brief, just enough to make me forget whatever I was about to say. We sat across from each other. The ticking of a small wall clock was too loud. "You always this quiet?" she asked. "Not always." "Then why now?" I started to answer, but there was a knock at the door. A man's voice, neighbor from upstairs, asking if she'd seen his missing cat. She stepped into the hall to talk, her voice softer than usual. I couldn't make out the words. When she came back, the air between us felt shifted, like something had been interrupted mid-step. "You know," she said, sitting down again, "people might get the wrong idea." "What idea?" She gave me a look that said I knew exactly what she meant. Then she sipped her tea. The heat from the cup rose between us. My eyes dropped to her hands, the way she held it close like a small shield. "I'm not—" I began, then stopped. She waited. I reached for her hand, just lightly over the table. Her fingers tensed, then relaxed. For a second, she didn't pull away. Then she did. "It's late," she said quietly. I set my cup down, stood. My chest felt tight, like I'd taken a step toward something and lost my footing. At the door, I turned. She was still at the table, one hand resting where mine had been a moment ago. For a heartbeat, it felt like the space between us could close. My hand tightened on the doorframe, but I left. We ran into each other on the stairs. She was coming down, I was going up. "Walk with me?" she asked, as if it were the most natural thing. The evening air was cool, tinged with the faint smell of rain from earlier. We didn't say much, just the sound of our steps against the pavement. Half a block from the cafe, she slowed, stopping at a bench under a street lamp. She sat, smoothing her hands over her knees. "You didn't come by yesterday," she said. I shrugged. "Thought you might want space." Her eyes narrowed slightly, not angry, more like she was trying to read me. "Space is fine. Disappearing is different." The words stayed with me. I sat down beside her. Our shoulders didn't touch, but the space between them felt deliberate. "I saw you talking to someone," I said before I could stop myself. "Tall guy, outside the cafe." Her mouth tilted into a half-smile. "You were watching?" I didn't answer. She looked ahead, past the parked cars, the flicker of the street lamp across the road. "Friend from work." We were talking about the rain. I felt stupid, but she didn't seem bothered. She let the silence stretch until it was almost too long. "You ever think about—" She stopped herself, shook her head. "No, forget it." "What?" Her fingers twisted the edge of her sleeve. "About lines. How close you can get to crossing them before you actually do. The question sat there, heavy, as if it didn't need my answer. I thought about telling her. About the way I replayed her voice in my head when the apartment was too quiet. About the nights I stared at my phone, willing it to light up with her name. Instead, I said, I don't think about it. I just stop before it's too late. She gave me a look, steady, searching. And how do you know when it's too late? I turned toward her. She didn't move. The light from the street lamp caught in her hair, in the curve of her cheek. I don't, I said. Something in her expression shifted. A door opening just a little wider. Her hand moved, resting for half a second on the bench between us. Close enough that I could have covered it with mine. Close enough that my chest ached from not doing it. We sat like that for a while, the quiet pressing in from all sides. When she finally stood, she didn't look at me. Walk me back. I did. At her door, she turned like she might say something else. But she didn't, and I was left with the question she hadn't really asked. Hanging there between us, unanswered. For 3 days I didn't see her. No texts. No accidental hallway meetings. Not even at the cafe. By the 4th day, I started going out of my way, timing my coffee runs, lingering in the lobby. Nothing. Then, one evening, I saw her door slightly open. A suitcase stood in the hallway, half-zipped. You going somewhere? I asked, keeping my voice light. She looked up from tying her hair. Just for a week. Visiting my sister. There was something in her tone. Like the sentence wasn't finished. I wanted to ask if she'd tell me the rest, but she'd already turned away. I helped carry the suitcase down the stairs. She thanked me, briefly touching my arm before stepping into the waiting cab. For the rest of the week, the building felt wrong. My apartment felt wrong. I'd find myself glancing at the door across the hall, catching echoes, her laugh through the wall, the clink of her cup on the counter, but they weren't real. On the 6th night, I sat in the cafe. Her seat was empty. I ordered tea instead of coffee, just to feel closer to her routine. That's when I overheard 2 baristas talking. She was in last week, one said. With that guy again. The one with the black jacket. Felt like a stone settling in my stomach. When she came back, it was like nothing had changed. A knock on my door. Tea? She asked, holding up her thermos. We sat in her kitchen, steam curling between us. I noticed her phone face down on the counter, lighting up now and then. She never turned it over. I wanted to ask who was on the other end. I wanted to say I'd heard. But the words wouldn't form without sounding like something else. Something I wasn't ready to admit I wanted from her. Instead, we talked about nothing. The weather, the broken elevator, the smell of the bakery downstairs in the mornings. At one point, she said, "You remind me of someone I used to know." I tried to smile. Good thing or bad thing? She didn't answer, just refilled my cup. When I left, I stood outside her door for a few seconds longer than I should have. My hand hovered over the wood, ready to knock, to say something that might have cracked whatever wall she'd quietly built back up. I didn't knock. Back in my apartment, I typed a message. You don't have to explain. Just don't disappear. I stared at it, deleted it. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was late when she knocked. I was half asleep, the TV low in the background. When I opened the door to find her standing there, hair damp from the drizzle outside. "Do you have sugar?" she asked. I nodded, stepped aside. She walked in without taking off her coat. In the kitchen, I poured some into a small jar for her. She didn't take it right away, just leaned against the counter, watching me. "You've been somewhere else lately," she said. I kept my back to her. "You too." Silence. Not uncomfortable, just thick. "I don't." She stopped, shook her head. "I don't want to make you think there's more here than there is." My fingers tightened around the jar. "And if there is?" She didn't move, didn't blink. Then I'd have to admit I've been lying to myself. The hum of the refrigerator filled the space between us. I turned, leaning back against the opposite counter so we were facing each other. "Lying about what?" "That I'm fine with the lines we've been walking." She let out a small laugh, the kind that's more about pressure than humor. I'm twice your age. I've already made enough messes in my life. I don't want to add you to that list. It was the closest she'd come to saying she cared. I stepped forward, setting the jar on the counter beside her. My hand brushed hers, barely. What if I'm not worried about the list? Her eyes softened, but she still held herself back, like leaning in would make something collapse. You don't know what you'd be giving up, she said. I know I'd be giving up wondering, I replied. The words seemed to land somewhere deep. She looked away, toward the window where rain streaked the glass. I'm scared of you, she said finally. Not in the way you think. You make me. Remember, I'm still here, and that's dangerous. I didn't have an answer for that. Not one that wouldn't tip us over the edge. So I just stepped closer. Close enough to smell the faint trace of her tea on her coat. Close enough that, if either of us moved a fraction, the gap would disappear. We stayed there. Eyes locked, rain in the background, the jar of sugar between us like a placeholder for something heavier. After what felt like forever, she reached for it. Our fingers touched again, longer this time. Okay, she said softly. Not yes, not no, just okay. Months later, it was the bench under the street lamp again. Same cool air, same faint smell of rain on the pavement. Only this time, she was already there when I arrived. Thermos beside her, steam curling from the cup in her hand. You're late, she said. I sat down. It's 8:47, same as the first time we sat here. She smiled, just enough to soften the lines around her eyes. You remember the time? I remember everything, I said, though not all of it out loud. Life had shifted quietly between then and now. We didn't talk about the exact moment things changed, when the hesitation stopped feeling like a wall and started feeling like a choice we'd already made. I started spending more mornings at her kitchen table, drinking tea instead of coffee. She began keeping sugar in a little jar by the window, like it had always been there. Our doors stayed unlocked more often than not. We never used the word together, but routines began fitting around each other. She'd leave a scarf on the back of my chair in the cafe. I'd fix the loose hinge on her cupboard without her asking. It wasn't perfect. Some days she'd retreat into herself, eyes distant. Some days I'd stay out later than I needed to, just to keep the air clear. But we always found our way back to the small things. The tap of her ring against a thermos lid, the way she'd fold my napkin in half without thinking. Tonight, we didn't say much. She poured me tea, handed it over with that same brief touch we'd passed back and forth for months. You still stare, she said. Still worth it, I replied. The street lamp flickered once, then steadied. She leaned back on the bench, watching the thin steam curl away from her cup. You know, she said, I don't think I believed in this before. Not like this. What changed? She turned to me. You didn't ask me to. It landed somewhere deep, the kind of sentence you don't need to answer. We sat until the tea cooled, until the air felt heavier with night. When we finally stood, she took my hand. Small, quiet, like it had always been meant to fit there. At her door, she paused, looking at me the way she had that first day in the cafe. Only now, there was nothing left to figure out. Okay, she said again, the same way she had in her kitchen months ago. This time I knew exactly what she meant.